All right. Hello, hello. This is going to be the instructional video for not the last human body system, because we don't have time to cover them all, but for the last one we will do, which is going to be the nervous system. So today we're going to focus on nervous system, and we've marched through one by one all of these guys. The last one we did was circulatory system. This lymphatic system, I told you, is much more, I like it better when people just call it the immune system. I would rather call this one immune system and talk about how your body fights defenses. We're not going to be able to get to that, but again, it's a really cool topic. So if you guys are getting into the body systems, really, I would take some time to look over the immune system. We're also not going to get to this one, endocrine system, but just to kind of at least lock into your head some vocabulary, endocrine is all about hormones. We're not going to be dealing with those either, but those are the chemicals that are all running around inside your body that help your body and the tissues regulate themselves. That's all about that homeostasis stuff that we learned earlier about how your body keeps everything regular. One of the main ways it does that is by having hormones where your cells are talking to each other to keep everything working in its nice narrow range of how your body cells like to work. Keep the temperature constant, keep the amount of salt in your body constant, keep all these things kind of regular and regulated. We're not going to get to that. So, but they're interesting systems if you to have the time to look into those. But today we're going to focus on nervous system and be done with it. This is our last one. So nervous system, as always though, we're going to go back to structures and functions. And remember, it's always good to review. The structures are the parts and the pieces of the system, and the functions are really just asking, what do those structures do, or how do they work? So the structures are just the parts, and the function are, what do those parts do, or how do they work? And for the nervous system, we're just going to keep it pretty simple again. You can get really into the structures with all the vocabulary words about all the parts and pieces, but let's just keep it simple. Nervous systems are divided into a central nervous system and a peripheral nervous system. Now, central, you guys should have a feeling of, just from the word, central means in the middle. In the central nervous system are the parts and pieces that are in the middle. And if you look on this figure, the kind of parts and pieces that are centered in the middle are these guys that I'm outlining in red. The central nervous system are those two parts. The first guy up top here, obviously, I think you guys would all know that that is your brain. And this part down here coming off the brain and coming down like a big tube, but it's not really a big hollow tube. It's mostly a tube of cells. It's packed with cells. That is going in the middle of your spine. It's protected by all these bones that are running down the middle, forming a cage around it. But inside those bones is a tube of brain of not brain cells, but of nervous system cells, and that whole structure is called the spinal cord. And because those two things line the central areas, the brain and the spinal cord are the central nervous system. And all these wires heading out, all these things going down to your arm, those are nerves. And that sort of makes sense. You know that your brain is going to control your movement, for example. So you got to have a way for your brain and spinal cord for you to control your muscles. So you have to have nerves going out. But nerves don't go out just to muscles. Nerves go out to everything in your body, including your stomach and your whole GI tract. So they go everywhere. They go out all into your stomach, to your glands, to pretty much the rest of your body, so that your brain has control of a lot of the other body systems through nerves. So your brain and spinal cord are packed with brain cells and spinal cord cells, and they have to communicate, and we're going to learn how they do that by sending their version of wires. They're not metal, they're made of cellular parts and pieces you're going to hear about later, but they have to send wires out to control the rest of the body, and that has to be done through nerves. And on the other end, your brain has to be learning about what's going on in the environment. And the only way it can do that is also through nerves, where your sensory system is giving your brain information about what's going on the outside so that your brain knows what to do. So the main function of the nervous system, this is getting back to the function of the nervous system, is to sense and respond. When your body is sensing things, there's all sorts of sensory structures that are sensing things like temperature and pressure and heat and what's happening in your vision and what you're smelling. There's all these sensory systems that are sending wires into your central nervous system, so your brain mostly can figure out what to do about it. And then if you are going to do something with any of the senses that are coming in, like if your eyes are telling you that there's a big nasty dog coming at you, your brain is definitely going to make a decision and send through the wires out to your muscles a decision to do something to get away from that threat. So senses are coming in through the nerves into your central nervous system. Central nervous system computes or decides what to do about it, sends a response. Response is back out to your body so that you can sense and respond. That is the function of your nervous system. And the central nervous system and peripheral nervous system work together to do that job. This is just to give you an idea of what the brain actually looks like. So this picture is sort of a realistic interpretation, but you really are only seeing what's on the surface. If you cut in like all these little like squiggles and lines and things that you see on the surface of the brain, it does not look like that inside. It's a super complicated structure. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but your central nervous system is looking like this. It's your brain, and then the spinal cord is directly attached to the brain. This is still all brain. It's considered brainstem, but right is in the beginning of your neck region, it starts into spinal cord, and the spinal cord is running through that vertebral column, that piece of the skeletal system, which is protecting that. So your whole central nervous system is mega protected by bones. Your central nervous system is protected by bones. You've got a whole skull, which is protecting the brain, and then you've got the whole vertebral column that's protecting the spinal cord. So every which way, your central nervous system is protected by either skull or by vertebral column going down, and then the nerves that are going to have to come out of from your spinal cord, have to find a way out of that vertebral column so that they can send messages out to your muscles. And same thing, your sensory system those nerves have to find a way in, and there are little holes in that vertebral column so that the nerves can get inside to your central nervous system. Just to give you an idea that all your sensory systems literally do send wires, and they're wired up to your brain. And you're going to learn more about that in a second. Let's just look at the eyes. We've mentioned that as being a sensory system where you're seeing some threat coming towards you, and your central nervous system is going to have to tell your muscles to get away. Well, let's just have a look to see that all sensory systems have to be wired into the brain. So your brain can decide what to do if it's really hot, if you're feeling something really hot, what to do if you're seeing a threat, what to do if you're smelling something really good in the kitchen. You're going to probably want to walk there to get whatever grandma or mom or auntie's cooking up, whatever. But all your senses have to wire up to the brain, so your brain can decide what to do. So here's your eyes. And in the back of the eye, you have all these brain cells here that are collecting the light coming in. And this is just showing you that they wire up. And in this case, the wires, if you follow the track, this diagram is showing you wires coming in like this. They're crossing. they're talking to this little area here, and then there's more wires going to the back of your brain. So it's really weird, but the back of the brain here is actually ending up getting a lot of the information coming from your eyes. And it is actually crazy, but if someone gets hit really badly in the back of their head so that they damage this brain area, even if their eyes are working fine and they're trying to send all the information about everything that you would see, if the back of your brain is actually damaged really badly, you are literally blind, as if you had no eyeballs at all, because the brain, which has to process all that information, is gone. So the information is all working. It's trying to come in, but your brain, the computer in here, cannot analyze everything that your eyes are trying to tell it about. So it's really cool. Your brain is really like a big computer, and all the information gets sent in with wires to the brain so that it can figure out what's going on. And when you're thinking or understanding anything, when you're thinking and understanding anything, that's just your brain computing everything from all the wires going in. So when you're thinking about something, or you're at a party and you're talking with people, your ears are getting information, your eyes are getting everything, and your brain is just putting it all together for you so that you understand or have some understanding about what's going on. It's an amazing and complicated thing. And again, that's all being done. Everything always has to come back to cells and to what the cells are doing to make the whole thing work. And it's very complicated. I just want you getting the big picture. And we're going to end this by coming back down to the cells to teach you about how these cells are working, what a brain cell or spinal cord cell looks like, how it actually does have a cellular version of a wire. All these details we're going to go into to just kind of give you an idea about how the parts make up the whole. And we've done that with every body system. If you're understanding things like that about how the parts of the system make up the whole complicated system, again, you're really doing a lot. And then one step further is to understand how that system, how the nervous system is interacting with other systems, and like your muscles to get away from a threat. Then you're really understanding something as well. Now, for the last part here where we're going to talk about how cells are working and what they're doing and how they're kind of building up from the smaller parts to the bigger parts of your brain and central nervous system, to put all that together and talk more about that cellular stuff, we're going to make this a family lecture. So my kid, who is studying to be a neuroscientist, she's going to finish off this whole lecture for you guys to teach you about cells. This is my kid. Her name is Maya, and she's going to give a shot at trying to teach you about how the cells work to do some of the things they do to make the nervous system be able to do the things that it does. So I'm going to pass the mic to Maya and let her finish this off for you guys today.
Hi, you guys. I'm Maya. I'm Mr. W's daughter visiting him. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the brain. So what Mr. W told you is that the brain has some basic functions like sensing and responding. And here's a really, really simple of that. So you might already be able to guess that what's going to be sensed in this picture is the temperature of this flame. This flame is really hot, and you're going to have some cells in the hand and cells all over the body that can sense temperature. And what you're going to want to do if your hand was on a flame like that is you want to move it away. But you can't really do that without having some sort of a nervous system. So this cell that was in the hand has a long wire that it sends all the way up to the spinal cord. And this is just a section of the spinal cord that we're showing you that's been chopped out, it looks like. And then there's going to be another cell in the spinal cord maybe that sends information back out of the spinal cord to this piece here, which is a muscle that looks like a bicep. And what that's going to do is the muscle constricts and allows you to move the hand. So in this really, really simple, kind of the most simple example, the thing that you sensed was the temperature, which was way too hot, and it needed a really quick response, which is that you were going to move with your muscles. You're going to move the hand away. so that you could protect the hand from burning. And that response happens really quickly. It's only a few cells that it uses. And if you'll notice, we had some signaling happening in the spinal cord, but not to the brain. So this green arrow up here shows that the information about the temperature is going to the brain so that you will eventually know about it. But that really quick response happened with just the spinal cord. So you can do a lot even before you start sensing things in the brain. And what do the cells actually look like? Here's just a cartoon of what we see most body cells look like, or a lot of body cells look like, which is just kind of blobs, like a skin cell, for example. And then here's a cartoon of a brain cell, which looks a little bit different. And that's because they have that big blob part, the cell body, but they also have those wires so that they can signal to each other. And if we think about that example that we looked at before, you had a sense cell. So let's say this is your sense cell with its blob. And then it was able to send its wire all the way the length of your arm. So even though those cells are pretty small, they can have really long processes or pieces. So this is the whole distance of your arm to your spinal cord. And then this cell got that signaled to that red cell. And then it sent the signal out. And what did you do from that temperature, that hot temperature signal, is you moved by using your muscle. So it's signaling out to the muscle. And so that's just a cartoon of, you can see that it has wires and it has little parts where it gets signals from the other wires. And here is what a real cell looks like, which is much more complicated. Here's that blob part, and then here's its wires, and you can see that the wires are branching, and then they branch and they branch and they branch until ultimately it has thousands of branches. And those thousands of branches, at the tip of each one, or at the ends of each of these branches, it's connecting and making different connections. So we don't see any of the other cells here, but you can imagine that these cells are densely packed next to each other, and they can be making contact and getting signals with one another. Here's another example of a cell. And if we look at a real picture of these cells in the brain, this is what that is. So now we see this is a real brain tissue, and they colored the cells in green. And there's so many that you can barely even follow. But here, for example, here's that cell body. It comes up, it branches like that, and then it's signaling to all of these other cells in here. And the whole tissue of the brain that we see, the whole brain and spinal cord, is made up of some cell bodies, but mostly tons of connections, these wires that allow all these cells to talk to each other. Because most of the things you do in your day are not as simple as sensing that something is hot and moving your hand. We get a lot of information from the senses about what we see, what we know about this stuff already, what we smell, what we hear, how we're feeling, and then we make complicated decisions and complicated responses, like to tell someone something or to move away from something or play a sport maybe or dance. And so you saw this picture already. Here's our human brain and spinal cord, but it's not just humans that sense and respond using brains. Here are some other brains. So I think this is the human brain up here in the top right. And here are lots of different brains with different sizes. A lot of animals are able to sense and respond. Even some ones that you think are really simple still have brains that are somewhat complicated. So what I do is I study fruit flies, which seem annoying and small and like they aren't very smart, but they're able to do some things really well with sensing and responding. Like if you're trying to swat a fruit fly, it's able to see you, so the sense that it's getting is that it sees you. And then its response is that it's flying, it might be dodging you, and they're really good at doing this to the point that they might even be better than you, and they can get away from you, and you wouldn't successfully swat them. So I study the visual system of fruit flies, but there are lots of different brains, all the way down to worms and things, and humans have one of the most complicated ones. But at their basic level, all they're doing is that they get sense information and they respond, and ultimately they can just do more and more complicated versions of this sensing and responding. So that is your basic introduction to the nervous system.